This is the last time we'll walk this path together, at least through Jefferson County. The roads we've followed have carried us from the first clearing of the forest, through war, through music, through heartbreak and hope. But before we say goodnight to this county, there's one more chapter to listen to, not of loud events, but of lives quietly lived, in a world still learning how to heal, how to change, and how to carry on. So, breathe deep, let your shoulders fall, and come with me, one last time, through time. As the Great Depression deepened, Jefferson County leaned into what it knew best: the land, the seasons, and each other. Farms became lifelines. Children grew up fast, learning to mend clothes, stretch meals, and walk miles in shoes that didn't quite fit. Families gathered around the radio at night, listening to Roosevelt's voice spill warmth into the cold kitchen. A letter from Eleanor J., Watertown, 1935. Quote, "The days are hard, but not empty. We work, we hope, we wait for rain or good news, whichever comes first." End quote. Neighbors helped neighbors. Barter replaced wages. And when there was nothing left to trade, people gave time, muscle, and kindness. Federal work programs brought some relief and purpose. The Works Progress Administration, or the WPA, and the Civilian Conservation Corps, or the CCC, came to Jefferson County with shovels, blueprints, and pay envelopes. They laid roads. They reinforced bridges. They built stone walls that still stand, their mortar outlasting memory. And they turned open hills into something lasting, like Thompson Park in Watertown. There, men hauled rock and timber by hand. They built gazebos, staircases, and scenic overlooks that gave working-class families a place to breathe again. A WPA Workers' Note, Watertown, 1937. Quote, "I carried rock till my hands bled, but my boy eats now. And when the sun hits that wall just right, I think that maybe we built something that matters." End quote. Even now, you can walk those same winding trails where once hardship shaped beauty. Long before the Great Depression, Jefferson County had learned to live quietly, and sometimes cleverly. During Prohibition, the country's proximity to Canada made it a haven for smugglers. Small boats crossed Lake Ontario under moonlight. They carried crates marked maple syrup or dry goods, but actually they were filled with whiskey and gin. Barns in Cape Vincent and Chameau held false floors, and sheds in Clayton were known to whistle if you knocked twice. There were whispers that half the country knew something or someone who smuggled, and the other half, they pretended just not to notice. Sheriffs sometimes looked the other way, sometimes they didn't, but no one wrote names down, and no one spoke above a whisper. It wasn't rebellion, it was survival, and maybe just a little bit of fun. When war came again in 1941, Jefferson County was ready. Not eager, but they were ready. Young men who had grown up hearing Civil War stories from their grandfathers and great-grandfathers now stood in line to serve. Factories in Watertown shifted to wartime production. Farmers increased output for the troops. Even school children collected scraps and planted gardens. A diary from Lillian B., Antwerp, 1943. Quote, "My brother's photo hangs by the stove. He writes often. I knit faster when I'm afraid." End quote. The war years brought absence and anxiety, but also quiet and enduring pride. Families stuck closer to home, and they wrote often to their boys overseas. And when the war ended, the joy was hushed, grateful and tired. As we move into the 1950s, it brought new roads, new schools, and new faces. Cars replaced wagons completely. Buildings crept outward from Watertown in all directions, and families now spoke of going to the city for the weekend. TVs appeared in living rooms. Dinner hours shifted, and a quiet generational line was crossed. Children no longer remembered outhouses, or milking before breakfast, or the smell of a wood stove inside their schoolroom. A note from an unnamed teacher in Ellisburg, 1958. Quote, "They ask what it was like before. I don't know how to explain silence to them, or stillness, or Sundays without sound." End quote. By the 1960s, Jefferson County began to turn its eye to history. Historical societies were formed. Old barns were photographed and cataloged. Cemeteries were mapped and stones were transcribed. People wanted to remember, not just the facts, but the feel of things. Church bells on winter mornings, letters tied with twine, the low hum of a crank radio before the noon report. An excerpt from the Centennial Program, Town of Lyme, 1963. Quote, "This town stands because someone once cut trees here. Someone once stood here in the snow. Someone once loved this place enough to stay." End quote. The Jefferson County of today stands on layers of memory. Not loud ones, not always famous ones, but the kind that matter when you lie awake at night, thinking about your grandmother's voice. The sound of leaves brushing the barn roof, or the way the snow falls softer near old fences. Jefferson County isn't a perfect place, but it remembers, and through remembering, it endures. So, this is the end of our walk, for now. The trails we've taken are quiet ones, but they're very real. And they are all now yours, too. Somewhere in Jefferson County tonight, an owl calls from the trees. A stone glows silver in the moonlight, and the wind slips between rows of names, whispering stories we've just begun to hear again. Next time, we'll begin again in Lewis County. But for now, close your eyes, let the stories rest, and sleep well. knowing you've carried their memory one step farther. Good night.